Hi, welcome to Off Script. I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Today on the show, we're taking a look at Godzilla X Kong, the New Empire. It's not versus, it's X. We were talking about it in the movie theater. Like, what is this X anyway? It's a mashup movie, kaiju monsters, Godzilla and Kong are friends for the first time, I guess. Anyway, we're going to tell you whether or not it's worth your time. We're also going to take a look at Late Night with the Devil. The new Shudder horror feature is out. This movie's a banger. Stick around for the review. I'm really excited to talk about it. I know it's got AI in it. We're going to talk about it. But before we get to all that, I want to talk about Indiana Jones taking a fat $130 million loss for Disney. That Dial of Destiny movie that came out last summer, huge bomb. Huge. What does that mean for Marvel?
Dial
what
of
does that mean
Doom.
for Lucasfilm, Star Wars? Oh, yeah. Dial of... it's a whole thing. And they got some board of directors meeting tomorrow. We're going to talk about what Disney's doing in our Death of Cinema segment in between our reviews. Before we get to all that, I want to talk about some quick stories and news this week. Before we get to news, Andy, I want to know, you've been revisiting some old classics this week, and I just wanted to take a second and shout them out. What have you watched? You had a little something going on, a little watch party. What's up?
So I took a look at the original 1988 Beetlejuice since the long-awaited follow-up is coming this fall, and I'd never seen it, and it's one of these like very culturally important moments. I feel like I've seen lots of like images and scenes from the movie all throughout my life. So I sat down, took a look at it, and was like really disappointed. Definitely a product of its time. It's not bad. I was really bored for like the first half. Beetlejuice doesn't show up until about halfway through.
Yeah.
It's really campy. I could see why it worked in 1988. The visuals are really interesting at the time. That was probably eye popping. But man, I just expected more from something that is such a cult classic and such a recognizable part of cinema. I was really surprised that I just thought it was kind of mediocre. But it was, it's a classic.
It's funny because when in front of Late Night with the Devil, we saw the trailer for Beetlejuice, the follow-up here. And I kind of leaned over and I mentioned, I was like, the funny thing is, like, Beetlejuice isn't that good. Like, it's big visuals, and it feels like a big Tim Burton movie because of the visuals. But when you actually go back and watch it again, yeah, it's pretty dry. Like, it doesn't move very quickly. The pacing's odd. Like, far from a perfect film. And it's funny how the nostalgia machine has just, like, picked it up and been like, yeah, Beetlejuice, it's great. Like, I don't think it did that well when it came out. It's a really odd feature to get a sequel for, but I'm glad you watched it. I'm glad we could talk about it at some point. We probably need to. One other movie you watched in honor of its 20th anniversary? 25th anniversary?
25th anniversary of The Matrix was this past weekend. So I decided to sit down and take another look at it. The Matrix was so huge when it came out, and I was like the ripe old age of 16, so just beginning my journey of cinema, and I could not get enough of this movie before it was, and this is pre-modern internet, so I was like reading magazines about The Matrix. They had cool stills, they had all these articles, in-depth interviews, and the thing is, they all said the same thing. They said The Matrix is a computer world where you can do things, kind of bend reality, and it was just such a cultural phenomenon, and it was great revisiting. It works so well. It's paced really good. It's a little long, and each act is about 45 minutes, but it just grabs you. It's enticing, great visuals, dialogue, the fights. It was the first time that like major stars had learned really complicated fight choreography. This is where we got bullet time and a lot of effects. Like it was, it still holds up. It still looks great. The one thing that I think surprised me, that once Morpheus gets captured and Neo's like, I'm going to go rescue him, it dawned on me that Neo hasn't really done anything in the whole movie to prove he can go and do anything. Like he did some cool stuff in the training, but he functionally hasn't proven himself. So it's kind of funny that they're like, yeah, so he goes from 0 to 100. It's still really so great though.
It underlines like the suicide mission like nature of what they're talking about. Yeah, because when Morpheus is captured, they're like in the bathroom wall hiding from agents, and it's not going well. Like they're nearly caught. So the idea of like, we're going to get a helicopter and spawn a bunch of guns and go in and blow up this whole lobby is like there's no magic behind it really. It's them just genuinely trying to like do some cool stuff and succeeding. Well, like that's the excitement. And then he becomes the one, right? Like that's the whole.
Yeah. Well, they babysit Neo when they first really go into the Matrix. Like he doesn't even have a gun until like things kind of get dangerous, and then the very next time he's coming in, it's to just totally demolish everything. It's great though. Love it. Great speeches, great dialogue.
Stephen Ford on Twitter posted the lobby scene in Open Map on Twitter, which is weird because I didn't think it would look different, but it does. Like the lobby scene is so iconic of them shooting up that lobby to like techno pop that seeing it without like the black bars on the top and bottom like looks genuinely baffling. But like a movie that really moves like the language of cinema forward, like moves sci-fi forward, moves action forward. Crazy. Like The Matrix is bonkers. If anything, it makes 2 and 3 look so much better in the rear view than they are, because they're great movies, but boy, 2 and 3 are boring, man. Like for long
First act
really
of 2 is rough. Real rough.
And then the freeway scene happens and it's like top 10 action scenes ever in history. It's crazy. Anyway, love The Matrix. Beetlejuice ain't so bad. I usually rewatch around the holidays, but nothing too exciting for me. I watched Doctor Strangelove for the first time this week, and I also watched James Cameron's The Abyss for the first time this week. 2 big features. Oh, nice. I don't know what. I don't know why back to back, but both a delight. Doctor Strangelove is hilarious. Never seen it. Loved it. Reminded me a lot of I Think You Should Leave, starring Tim Robinson. Like just these big, bombastic characters approaching insane situations with this level of normalcy. And then Abyss is actually a lot of fun as far as the James Cameron movie goes. But like the pink aliens are a lot, and the Alan Silvestri score is a little over the top. And I think it's telling because Cameron and Silvestri never worked together again. It's the only movie they ever did. I don't know, creative differences, but a lot of fun. People nearly died. I hear there's a whole documentary about it. You ever seen it?
No, but I have heard. Yeah, one of the actresses was really upset because she was like, they were doing like a resuscitation scene or something, and she was getting like slapped around, and it was freezing, basically getting waterboarded. And Cameron was just like, again, another take, another take.
Oh,
and she's just getting slapped like 10 times in a row.
It's like apparently Cameron was a nightmare on it. Young hotshot director making his dream, like just a whole thing. But anyway, let's get to the news. All right, first story this week: Mission Impossible 8 has a new star. Love Lies Bleeding breakout Katy O'Brien. Huge W for Katy. We loved her in Love Lies Bleeding. We watched just a couple weeks ago. Obviously, going to be a big boon for Mission Impossible, who could use the help. I think. What do you know about this story, Andy?
So we just saw Love Lies Bleeding a couple of weeks ago, and apparently Tom Cruise did as well, because breakout star Katy O'Brien, who plays a muscle-bound bodybuilder in that movie, is, like you said, been tapped to be in the next Mission Impossible film. So she's making this huge jump. She's also she's been in film and TV for a while. She's in The Mandalorian. She's in some other stuff. So a veteran of the screen, but now is going to make a big jump. And she's the perfect kind of person for a franchise like this. It's like and she can be either side. She can be like one of the bad guys that, she's going to be like arms ripped, 6-pack, like that kind of thing. It's the kind of like old school Stallone, Schwarzenegger, like we need a body to put up there and rub oil on and like flex muscles and stuff. It's great. She's going to be perfect for that franchise.
Yeah, in Mandalorian, and apparently she's in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, a film we watched here on the show, but I don't recall her being in it. She's just kind of a big, imposing lady, I think. But in these movies, I think they're going to lean into the form a lot more. She's just got such a silhouette in Love Lies Bleeding. Like, good God, she's etched out of marble. Huge arms. You can see the veins popping out. I think that's what she's going to be in Mission Impossible, I would imagine. And she's also going to be in Twisters, which I didn't know about, opposite Glenn Powell and Daisy Edgar Jones. So keep an eye on Katy O'Brien. Up-and-coming star. Watch out. Speaking of stars, Star Trek has its screenwriter for their new film, Star Trek 4. Those Star Trek movies with, what's his name? The guy from Dungeons and Dragons is Captain Kirk. Boy, they're making another one.
Chris Pine.
Chris Pine, yes. Clearly I'm unequipped for this one, Andy. What do you know about Star Trek 4?
So the fourth Star Trek in like the series that was originally rebooted in 2009, or the film, and with Chris Pine and Zachary Quinto, and Zoe Saldana as well, looks like it's going to finally be getting its fourth iteration. I can't believe how long this series of films. It's been almost 15 years. It'll be 16 or 17 by the time this fourth one comes out. And the Star Trek 3 was in like 2016, so it's been a long time. But they're trying to get another one of these off the ground. At one point, it was with Tarantino even and some other writers, and they kept dropping out. Really falling through, but it looks like they finally have a writer, and they're going to be moving forward with this movie. And these stars have been in it, like I said, it's a long time, almost 2 decades. So it'll be interesting to see what they kind of come up with.
Star Trek Beyond came out in 2016, so A, it's hard to believe it's been 8 years, and B, I can't imagine it'll be particularly tough to lock all these people down. I know a lot of them are still working, obviously, but it's not quite as hot as right off the heels of Star Trek 3. It has been a minute. And let me tell you, I'm not the biggest fan of Star Trek, but I like these new movies fine, like for what they are. And I'm really not looking forward to watching a new Star Trek where all these characters look notably older and are reminiscing about all these great adventures they had among the stars that none of us have ever seen because there's been 9 years between these movies, you know? Like, I kind of did the same thing with Guardians 3. Any of these superhero or, like, big cast movies where it's, like, the last one, it's like, man, we had so many good adventures, didn't we? No, you didn't. Like, you only made a couple of them in, like, 15 years. And I guess that's fine. Like, you know, I get making movies is expensive, but hopefully Paramount can figure out something. I don't know if J.J. Abrams is going to be attached to make this, but I know his studio Bad Robot still is. I know he had talked about this at their last big, I don't know, open investors meeting or something, and we goofed on him here on the show because it was like, what do you mean you're making Star Trek 4 this year? That's bananas. Obviously not true. But something's going on. They're trying to get something moving. I mean, Star Trek's a big property, and why not, right? Why not make another Star Trek?
Yeah, it's a pretty successful property. The 3 films, even though they've kind of had diminishing returns, but there's a fan base out there. They're big, exciting summer blockbuster movies. Like, it's a hit. They just gotta get it through. They got to get the writer, get a director, actually produce the thing, and then yeah, I'm sure it'll make money. But I can't believe at this point you almost should just talk about a reboot with a new young cast, a new Kirk, like, because everyone's they're not hot young actors out now. They're hot middle-aged actors now.
Right. We'll see if Paramount can hand off any better than any of these other franchises have. Speaking of handoffs, Alamo Drafthouse is up for sale. The whole thing, the whole chain. We think. This was reported from Deadline. They had heard from some insiders ahead of CinemaCon next week, which is the annual major studio exhibitor loving in Las Vegas. Apparently, Alamo, which is 41 locations across 13 states, is, maybe looking for a buyout, which, might be a good thing. Through the pandemic, they really struggled. They closed a few locations. It looks like they're up like $134 million this year, which is a quarter, 25% better than last year. So their numbers are increasing. I know their prices are also increasing too, but for what it's worth. Andy, not much of a story here, really more of a news bulletin. What do you think about Alamo Drafthouse going up in the air?
I mean, not surprising. Like I said, they've really struggled, like all theaters did. But I think the premium theaters like Alamo, which feature like you can get alcohol at your seat, you can order other food. It's all become very expensive. We know both their tickets and their menus gotten more expensive over the last few years. So it's not surprising that it's up for sale. The question is, will anyone want to buy it? Does anyone want to get into the theater business? If anyone does, it might be some of the big players like Apple or Amazon, something like that. But we'll see.
It's funny because there's a new theater chain that's popping up near us, at least near my place, called Evo, EVO, and they are Alamo's almost exact formula to the price. Their hamburgers are priced the same. They're both like $16 or whatever to get them in theaters, right? With a handful of fries. But their whole thing is they've got games out front in the lobby and like a little bowling alley, and you can have your kid come out for a birthday. Like, trying to figure out how to increase the value proposition of taking your family to the theater is clearly something that theaters are investing in. And it seems like new ideas in the space are worth propping up. Like, this seemed to be successful in some capacity. But Alamo's in a weird place because unlike traditional theater chains, they got to pay waiters and bartenders, and they have like big overhead food costs that they have to make sure they keep up with. And food's not getting any cheaper, right? Concessions aren't. And they also want to make sure that they are stringent with their rules about keeping people who are quiet out and what have you. I guess what I'm saying is Alamo does things differently, and whoever ends up taking them on is going to be met with that challenge, I think, creatively by Alamo fans that, hey, we want things to have a certain tone at this chain. We don't want it to be diluted like the more mainstream ones like Cinemark and Regal and AMC. So hopefully if Alamo is indeed for sale, whoever picks it up is willing to do it with gentle hands. One more story this week from the box office. Godzilla x Kong has a huge, monstrous $80 million domestic box office opening. Insane for the fifth film in the MonsterVerse franchise. Warner Brothers and Legendary just can't go wrong, huh? And here I am talking about how Warner Brothers is broke. Boy, they got another banger on their hands. Crazy.
Back-to-back hits for Warner Brothers. They, of course, started March with Dune 2, which just crossed 600 million, and will be actually on streaming PVOD to rent in the next couple of days, I think. So Dune, obviously, a huge hit. Now, Godzilla Kong was supposed to open in $45 to $50 million area, opened up at huge 80 million and almost 200 million. Globally, biggest start of the year, even bigger than Dune. It's a huge hit for Legendary and Warner Brothers. It's good for theaters. Man, they're eating good early this first quarter.
I shouldn't be surprised by this. We've been doing this podcast too long for me to be surprised by this. But I'm going to be honest, like when we actually went to see Godzilla x Kong, I was surprised by how many people were in the theater with us and how many of those people were, I know, and how many were families and kids, lots of kids. And I guess I don't think of this as a children's film. Like I really don't. But like I did realize sitting in the theater, it totally fits the bill. Yeah, any kid that likes going to the museum and likes dinosaurs or any science kids, like which a lot of kids enter that stage in their life, like perfect cannon fodder. You can even bring the younger siblings, right? It's not going to be a lot of cursing. They're not going to have any big concepts the kids aren't going to get. They're not going to have any that woke crap. Like it's just going to be a good old-fashioned monster movie. And hey, jokes aside, who doesn't love watching monsters get beat up? Like, and I can rag on Fast and Furious for being tired, and I can give other major franchises like Transformers a hard time because they seem too big for what it is. But somehow like these movies just come out and keep crushing it. And like in a weird way, that's what going to the movies is all about, right? Like having a fun time, munching your popcorn in the dark, watching monsters clown on each other. Any other thoughts for the review, Andy? I know we're just about on it. Might as well jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to mention that Oppenheimer opened in Japan for the first time, which was a big controversial thing because of course the U.S. dropped nuclear warheads on Japan, and so they were definitely not super excited about Oppenheimer. It did take some time to get there. It opened at 2.6 million. One of the biggest opens for Hollywood films in Japan. We'll continue to see how it does over there and how it's kind of received, because we definitely I've read some things about it basically triggering a lot of trauma in those audiences who had family and extended family who lived through those times. So it's a really interesting release.
Yeah, odd story for Oppenheimer, but I'm glad to hear it's doing well. I think I was reading some early reviews out of Japan and people talking about how unique it feels as an experience to watch. It's a little like watching The Wind Rises, Hayao Miyazaki's previous film before Boy and the Heron. Here in the United States or anywhere, because that was about Japan fighting Korea and somebody making weapons that are going to war. Like, so it's a weird thing to kind of watch and experience, but I'm glad it's doing well. Hopefully, I don't know, there's some conversation about it somewhere, I guess, but it's Oppenheimer. With that, we should move into our first review of the episode. Andy's going to be taking the summary on this one. How timely, of course, for our previous Godzilla x Kong story. Andy, please take it away.
Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. So this is the fifth film in the MonsterVerse cinematic universe, which started in 2014's Godzilla, followed up with Kong Skull Island, Godzilla King of the Monsters. The most recent one was Godzilla vs. Kong. There's a lot of these, and we're finally here, Godzilla Kong, The New Empire. Following the events of the previous film, we see King Kong, who is more or less the protagonist of the movie, and is in Hollow Earth, which is empty place in the middle of the earth where there's dinosaurs, giant bugs, gravity kind of works different. Somehow there's light down there, but King Kong is living in Hollow Earth. He's lonely. He wants some companionship and family. Not really a whole lot of other people around. Meanwhile, Godzilla is living in the ocean, coming out to fight other kaiju, laying waste to a whole lot of destruction. Kong eventually wanders around Hollow Earth a little bit more and discovers another race of giant apes down there. Discovers kind of this, it's like the Baby Yoda version of King Kong, this like kind of small Kid Kong thing, and also finds the evil Scar King, who has plans to kind of take over the Earth and ascend back. He's been trapped in Hollow Earth for a millennia. Amongst this are returning human characters that we don't care anything about. Rebecca Hall's Eileen Andrews with the worst Simple Jack haircut. Brian Tyree Henry and Dan Stevens are also back. They were in the previous film. At one point, Millie Bobby Brown was in one of these or two of these. She's not in this one. They're kind of following around our giant kaiju to basically explain the plot. It gets a little weird, but it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of bang crash. It's a lot of fun moments. Zach, what do you think?
Simple Jack haircut? Is that what you said?
Yes.
You slipped that in so smooth. Poor Rebecca Hall. Rebecca Hall is too good for this movie. Godzilla X Kong is fun. I think this movie is genuinely a fun time. At least in its first half hour and its last half hour. The open of this movie, I'm telling you, the first like 25 minutes are genuinely a good time. And the end, of course, your climactic monster fights, great time. But it's 2 hours long, and my God, the hour in the middle is a drag, man. And it sucks because it starts so good and it ends so good. And I remember thinking as I was sitting in the theater through the whole first act, boy, this one moves really great. Adam Wingard, hot off the heels of Godzilla vs. Kong. He's putting something new together. He knows the medium. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to play with these action figures that are these giant monsters and how to run them together just right. But then you get to all the human stuff, and it is such a bore. And now I get why I couldn't remember who was starring in this film, and you had to tell me last episode that it's Rebecca Hall and Brian Tyree Henry from the previous film and Dan Stevens, and I now I know why I didn't see them a lot in advertising, because it's like they had to have. Legendary's got to know, like the human stuff is so dry, so doesn't work, drags down the monster stuff. Hard to believe. Where do you want to jump in here?
Well, let's jump in with the action, because that's really why people come to these movies. I remember Michael Shannon last summer talked about the Flash movie and how he really didn't like it, and how it was like a kid throwing their action figures together. That's what this movie reminds me of, but in a good way, because that's what we're here. We're here for big monster fights. We see King Kong fighting other big apes, fighting Godzilla. They eventually team up against the Scar King. There's a couple of other surprises in there as well from the monster universe, and the fights are great. And some of it is literally out of wrestling. There's a part where Godzilla literally suplexes King Kong off the pyramids, and that was just like, it's like it was written by a 5-year-old. It's amazing. So like the action is probably the best part, and that's why people come to these.
Like I said, like Adam Wingard like seems to know where he's at after Godzilla versus Kong. Like not only is there your two titans, right, teaming up in this feature, which is a good time, but there's also a good variety of other additional kaiju that are dealt with, at least in the early part of the feature, and then towards the end, to fight Godzilla and Kong together, right? Like you got to have an equal and opposite force that you're going to throw against them, which is pretty satisfying, I should say. But at least in the early parts, like some of the monsters they just throw up at the start are great. This giant like crab creature Godzilla's fighting, and this weird like serpent thing that's underwater that shoots pink lightning, and even Godzilla's like pink lightning, right? Which is obviously different from his traditional blue. Like it seems like this film approaches these monsters with the feeling of like, yes, we are going to be running them against each other like children's action figures. And the VFX works great for that. It does make me wonder at some point, like when I'm watching one of these long sequences and my brain just starts to like space out in the middle of a giant CGI monster fight, because I realize I'm not really seeing anything real. I'm just kind of waiting for the thing to wrap up. like making those sequences progressively interesting is a challenge, especially this being not the first or second or third, but again, like fifth movie in this MonsterVerse franchise, as I understand it. Like, it's hard to make those good. And they managed to do that by giving you props, right? Godzilla and Kong have weapons now. Or at least Kong does. It's not just using his fists. He's got like this axe thing from the previous feature. And if you keep an eye on the trailer, you might even notice this like power glove thing that comes in later.
His mech arm, yeah.
He's got a smaller child-sized Kong that he swings around sometimes and slams into other creatures, which is really funny. Like managing to make those fights progressively visually interesting is, I think, a big victory for this movie, and like makes those fights a good time every time you see them. You're just like, oh man, take a bite of the popcorn. I came here for the monster fights. I love the monster fights. Like they work. They work great. Those are the best, the highs of the film, I think.
Yeah, we have a really interesting antagonist in the Scar King, which is like a bad ape. He's big like Kong, but he's kind of more gangly, flips like around. He's got
Kong.
this, he's got this awesome whip made of spines, which is really metal. You know, clearly the bad guy that you love to hate. By contrast, the stuff that doesn't work at all are these dumb human plots. Rebecca Hall and her daughter Gia, played by Kaylee Hoddle, from the previous movie, they discover her lost in Hollow Earth. She can like telepathically communicate with Kong and sign with Kong. She can talk to Godzilla also telepathically. Like, it's really bizarre. Brian Tyree Henry has a loser podcast, just like ourselves. There's a lot of podcast jokes that really don't work, and he's supposed to be the comic relief, and none of his jokes land. I feel so bad because he's a great actor, given really poor material to work with. They're just kind of following and investigating Kong and basically explaining the plot. It gets really, really complicated near the end, where there's just all this stuff about reversing the flow of gravity and electromagnetic this and telepathic that and like crystal pyramid. It's like, what is going on? Just show me the fight. So like, again, the human characters and the human plot are the real weak point.
Yeah, it's funny, like walking out of this feature, I was talking about how I felt like a lot of this was like put together in reshoots, because a lot of the human stuff is so slow, and in these scenes our characters are just rushing from scene to scene. Somebody will say like, well, hey, Rebecca Hall, why is it a big deal that your character's daughter, like, you know, needs to go to Hollow Earth? And she's like, because she's having bad dreams and she doesn't believe in herself, and it's my daughter, so we got to go now. She gets all teary-eyed because Rebecca Hall can turn it on. Again, she's great in this movie. And Brian Tyree Henry is like trying to work with a script that's just not that funny. I thought his opening scene is kind of funny. Like the opening salvo of Brian Tyree Henry, not bad. And then it just starts to slide back, because he's like, oh, there's this anti-gravity thing. And she's like, how does it work? He's like, I'll tell you later. We gotta run to the next scene. Like they're just like sprinting from scene to scene. And then you got Dan Stevens as Trapper, who is this like Ace Ventura, red-clad big pet veterinarian that I can't remember was in the previous feature or not, but he is implied to have a previous relationship with Rebecca Hall's character. And interestingly enough, Dan Stevens plays a lot of villains. I kept waiting for him to turn and be like the villain character, because he seems really villainous. And then, like, as the movie goes on, he just keeps kind of wandering through this path of like, he seems like a good dude, but I don't know, there may be something a little sinister there. And I think that was intentional. I believe, much like that Volkswagen ad shot that people have been dunking on Twitter, I think it was 100% on purpose. I think it was designed that way to give it a little bit of flair. I think Stevens is doing something intentional, and I think that's good, but it doesn't make the movie any shorter. Like, God, these human parts are just such a dull drag down. Yeah, that's where I'm at on the human.
Yeah, Dan Stevens is better. He's definitely more entertaining. He's kind of a little bit of that Han Solo, Indiana Jones
anti-hero kind of,
yeah. He's there for. He conveniently always has exactly what they need. They're like, oh, Kong's. Oh, yeah, that's what he's like the animal vet. He's like Kong's personal doctor. He beginning of the movie, Kong has like a toothache, and they have this like giant machine to like yank his tooth and give him a replacement. So he's there for those convenient reasons. He's also the he's kind of the pilot of they have a vessel to explore Hollow Earth. He's probably the strongest of the human characters, but and there's this eye rolling subplot about how Rebecca Hall and her daughter they're not really getting along, and she's having a hard time in school, and she's having these weird visions, and again, none of that stuff like really works, and I could care less. But I'm just like, just get to the fights.
Yeah, like, and it's funny because the fights, I feel like the fights lack a lot of, I mean, they're creative, but I should say a lot of the monster engagements in general, when Kong's like running around Hollow Earth or sitting there nursing his sore tooth or being sad that he didn't have anybody to fight. Like, a lot of that's just grunts and groans. We were looking on IMDb for who the voices are for Godzilla and Kong, and I'm not even sure there are any. I think they might just be completely fabricated. And like, it's funny because a lot of those scenes are the stuff that work the best, and I think that's the stuff that requires much less physical, tangible direction than the human stuff. Because the human stuff, you got to direct actors on a set. Hey, stand here, hit your mark. You're going to look at this person and say this. Okay, let's move the camera, get the right lens, get the lighting. Like, a lot of the CGI stuff is like, these are just crunched VFX workers putting this together, which is good. That's great, but it's just funny that there's like this odd power dynamic in this film when you're watching it, that like the monster stuff clearly works so much better. But in the world of Godzilla x Kong, Godzilla and Kong are not gods. They have to do everything in service of the humans. The humans have to take care of them and make them feel better and fix Kong's toothache. Like, the humans are the ones running the show. But then when you actually go see the movie, you couldn't care less about the human stuff. It's like, get out of here. Like, get to the goods, you know? Like, that's what we all want to see. More of that. Less actors. Give me more CGI monster madness. Like, what an odd thing to say.
It's definitely too long. Like, it's a full 2 hours. You could cut 15, 20 minutes and have a tight 100-minute movie. It would work just as well. Good fun score by Tom Holkenborg, otherwise known as Junkie XL, who did the score for things like Mad Max Fury Road and Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to ask before we move on to final recommendations, Andy, is there any need, you think, for the next movie, whatever they do here, and they're going to make another one. It's made enough money. My God, they're going to make another one of these. Is there any need to stick with this core cast, or do we just bail on them? Because you can keep Godzilla and Kong, obviously. You just have other humans, right, that deal with them in some capacity, or maybe like have these characters be like cursory side. Like, how long are we going to keep these human characters running around? Like, we don't care about Rebecca Hall. She doesn't need any additional, you know? Like, am I crazy?
It's like Millie Bobby Brown was in a couple of these and now she's not. So you can always kind of phase them out. Unfortunately, I do think you got to stick with them somewhat so they give like people a consistency that they can see film to film. So like, we're probably going to have at least Rebecca Hall and Brian Tyree Henry in this. The question is like, how do you go bigger? Because you've had Godzilla and Kong fight each other. Now you've had the team up movie and had them fight other dangers. Like, how do you go bigger than you? And they've done a lot of the other. They've done Ghidorah and Rodan and like some of the other Toho creations for these. So it's like, how do you go even bigger than you've gone? They got to go to the moon. They got to time travel.
Right.
They got to be aliens.
It's got to be space. I think that's the only place something as big as these creatures can come from. And it's funny because even though they do the Hollow Earth gag, the way you get to Hollow Earth in the world of Godzilla Kong is basically a portal anyway. It's like these portals that open up made out of energy that you go into, and then you have this whole sequence down, which is in the film.
Yeah, they're like,
and then you show up. Right. So like, it might as well be a multi-dimensional portal. They might as well be flying through one of those Dune ships on Spice. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, just going somewhere else. So it's got to be
on Mars
invasion. Yep. UFO shows up. Oh God, what is it? Drops Mecha Godzilla. You know what I mean? And then they're on. Like, it's got to be the next thing, I think. Or maybe they'll fight the AI from Mission Impossible. Any other thoughts for recommendations, Andy?
I think I'm ready.
The Entity. Andy, would you recommend Godzilla Kong, The New Empire?
I would. It's a lot of fun. Really great action. We get to see big kaiju battles. We get to see Godzilla and Kong team up. The human character stuff can always go in these movies, but you got to put names to sell it. Definitely helps. It could be a little bit shorter, but it's definitely a lot of fun. Really enjoyed it.
I think it's a good time. Would recommend. It's a bore in the middle, but if you're watching at home, that'll be the bit you get up and do your laundry for. You know what I mean? Like the open and close is good. I like Godzilla v Kong. Godzilla X Kong is fun. Like I'm telling you, they're great popcorn features. But for the next one, if they do stick with the cast, cut a half hour out of the movie and literally just make them the B plot, because I think these movies still try to make the human people the A plot. And it's so not. It's like the human stuff is so obviously outshined by the reason we're all in the theater, which is to watch the monsters. Like, just go all the way in next time. That's it. Like, lean it back. Give me 25 minutes of people running around screaming about Godzilla blowing something up, and then cut to Godzilla blowing things up. That's what we all want. It's a good time. Otherwise, would recommend Godzilla Kong. It's a surprisingly good time at the movies. And with that, we should move into our middle segment. Lately, we've been talking about trailers, things that are coming out soon that we want you to see, and we've done a few of those in the past few weeks, so now I want to return to a tried and true format, something we've done on the show for a very long time. I'm going to be heading up the conversation on it, but I got to have Andy intro it for me. Andy, what do we call this segment?
It's time for the death of cinema.
All right. So what we're talking about today is Disney. Disney, the House of Mouse. I want to talk about Marvel. I want to talk about Star Wars. I want to talk about 20th Century Fox and with that with X-Men. But we're going to do this all through the lens of a very, very recent report from Forbes just over the weekend. Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny whips up a $130 million loss for Disney. Indiana Jones 5 cost them over $130 million. And those are just estimates. We have learned from Forbes and their reporting the Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny cost $387.2 million to make. Good God. That is one of the most expensive films of all time. That costs more than the Avatar films. That costs more than Dune 1 and 2 combined. That costs more than nearly every previous Indiana Jones feature put together, adjusted for inflation. Not just like, oh, well, Raiders only cost this much back when that. No. Like, adjusted for now, it still costs more. They spent so much money on this movie, $300 million to shoot it, and then another $75 million for CGI and reshoots and touch-ups and post-production and de-aging Harrison Ford for the train scene at the beginning that everybody seems to agree is the best part of the movie. Insanity, right? Who would clear this? Who would say this is okay? Especially considering, looking in the rear view, that Dial of Destiny only made 49% of what of its return from what the previous movie Crystal Skull made, which is crazy. Like, it made less than was expected. All around, this thing didn't work. And we covered it here on the show. We talked about why it didn't work. Low critical score, low audience score. I guess what I want to talk about now is tomorrow Disney is having a vote at their so-and-so camp away from camp.
Earnings call
to try to determine the future direction of Disney by assigning a couple of seats on the board of directors to some different people. And there's been some infighting between Bob Iger and Nelson Peltz, a billionaire activist investor who's got quite a stake in Disney, who believes that maybe things should be moving in a different direction. Maybe leadership at Disney needs a change up. And I'm going to be honest, it's hard for me to disagree, especially looking at numbers like this, especially looking at where Marvel is now, especially looking at where Star Wars is now. So Andy and I were having a conversation about this over the weekend. I just kind of wanted to talk about that here on the show a minute. But first, Andy, how did they spend this much money on Indiana Jones? What were they thinking? Who was in charge of this thing? Like, good God, crazy.
Man, I really don't know, outside of maybe the shooting on location. It's always, I guess, the effects budget that balloons and gets out of control, but it just doesn't look very good. And we've said before, you can de-age a face, you can't de-age a body. Like, we know it's not Harrison Ford like jumping through windows and taking falls. Those are, it's all the stunt doubles doing all the work. But the movie's just completely forgettable. It doesn't grab you. It doesn't have like this great mystery that really reels you in. Doesn't have like the fun characters that we've gotten from the previous things. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't look very good. And it's like, what did you spend $400 million on, and why did you think that you would make $1 billion back? Right. Like, I mean, it's a classic property, but it's a classic property. It's old at this point. It's kind of, I mean, it was old when the fourth one came out, and that's been 15 years since then. It's like, why are we still doing this character, it just doesn't work anymore. Like you got to kind of reinvent. So it's crazy that anyone thought that this movie would be a hit and that they greenlit this kind of a budget.
Yeah, like the acceptance that this was going to work and it was some kind of sure thing, especially with numbers like this, is so bonkers. And this is not the first time Disney has done this. Like, they honestly seem privy to this, to greenlight a feature and not really have a creative direction in mind, or a show in the case of some of these Disney Plus shows. And then just balloon budgets, right? Like, just put VFX teams on overtime. We've talked a number of times on the show about VFX teams and production houses that have worked for Disney who've reported terrible experiences. Crunch, last minute changes, test screenings where they said, oh, you have to change half the film right before it comes out. Like, insane requirements from Disney, all with these hugely ballooning costs because they just do not seem to have quality creative at the center of it. And like, that's the thing that's so baffling about this. Raiders of the Lost Ark cost $20 million to shoot. Adjusted for inflation, that's $71 million. This was nearly $400 million. Now, I get you don't have young Spielberg on screen, but the only difference between those costs is the creative. It's the creative behind the features. Like, that's the difference.
It's more than The Force Awakens cost.
Yeah, and the creative is cheaper. Like, why wouldn't you go with the cheaper, bigger creative option? Like, this idea that we're running towards on a spreadsheet, yeah, it looks like it costs a lot, but it's going to make it back. Like, it's just, it's a dumber gamble than just giving a low budget studio less money to make something higher concept than just like filling this stuff out with CGI. I don't think anybody comes out on the top of this. Not to mention like this going to Disney Plus, which they can't really track numbers for because they'll never know if somebody's subscribing to Disney Plus just to watch Dial of Destiny or any of the other content on there. So like, that doesn't really help them. If anything, it might hurt their Blu-ray sales. Like, they just seem to be in a really odd place right now with the content they're making and where they're putting it.
Content's a huge problem. Again, this all comes back to Disney Plus because they need more and more content to support a streaming service. It's so much, which is why in the beginning, when everyone was just licensing to Netflix, that was the way to go. But everyone got greedy and saw the kind of money Netflix was going and said, no, we want a piece of that pie, not realizing the ingredients. So that I'm going to continue with this analogy are quite costly. It is so expensive, and the content spend, it's just huge. And again, how do you measure it? Yes, they have 240 million subscribers, but what are they watching? What is bringing them in? What is keeping them? It's not Indiana Jones.
It's crazy. And none of this helps Bob Iger's case, who again is being pushed by the board of directors to maybe make a change, right? Maybe it's time for some leadership shakeup.
Iceberg Iger.
Iger has moved on a lot of the Iceberg Iger. Iger's moved on a lot of this stuff and helped get the company obviously where it is. It's CEO. He was the one who got Disney Plus going. He was the one who moved to buy Lucasfilm for $4 billion in 2012. And remember when Disney bought Lucasfilm, they functionally got 3 properties: Indiana Jones, Star Wars, and Willow, right? They made one Indiana Jones movie that was a huge loss. Star Wars, they're working on it, but it's not going great. And Willow, they made one series for $100 million and then quietly pulled it from Disney Plus after 6 months because nobody watched it. I don't even think it's on there anymore. Like, it's not. So now it's like lost media, $100 million project, and like, it's nowhere, like it doesn't make sense. And Disney has got to figure out where they're headed next. But the scary thing is when you look at a board of directors and Disney is understanding just how much reach Disney has in the creative space, right? They could take things anywhere. And the idea of that leadership rapidly changing hands to somebody who is simply bent on making money isn't necessarily ideal. When Bob Chapek took over from Iger, Bob Chapek wanted to cut costs. That was the whole deal. We are going to make money. We are going to make hay while the sun's shining. We're going to leverage a lot of our properties and push them straight to Disney Plus, and we're going to dilute Marvel, and we're going to dilute Star Wars to do it. And now we're here. So I don't even know what the next step is, right? Andy, any ideas? Where do they go from here?
Well, Warner Brothers had a very interesting strategy. They were kind of doing a mixed thing where they were doing theatrical releases and also thinking about kind of bigger HBO Max things. And then they pivoted and said, no, we're not going to make movies for HBO Max. Or, I mean, they still do, but like they pivoted to like, we are going theatrical. We want to build theatrical properties. We don't want to make like a DC movie for HBO Max. We don't want to make, they might do a series, but their focus is on theatrical and making those big movies that work and also have a lot of cultural impact. And Disney is just, because they need so much content, they're leveraging all their properties into mediocre Disney Plus shows that just dilute the brand. They make people uninterested, and their big movies are years away. The next Disney release is Deadpool, I think. That's the big one in June or July. They don't have any other Marvels coming out. I guess they got Pixar over the summer as well, but they just don't have a lot of output, and they relegated so much of it to Disney Plus that it's hurting their brand. Disney isn't the name for entertainment that it was for nearly 100 years.
No, if anything, it seems more like Disney is becoming akin to Boeing, right? Their airplanes are falling apart. And it's like, what are you guys doing? Like, who is the leadership who's letting these things roll off the company line? Like who is allowing this creative to get through? And I don't know, but I think if you're going to go in a direction, the answer to dig Disney out is just that. It's literally good creative. You have to start making good movies. You start making movies that are getting 90s on Rotten. You start making films that are getting multiple Academy Award nominations. You cannot be making Disney Wish. You cannot be making a 100th anniversary Disney Princess animated sing-along feature.
Secret Invasion.
It gets nothing. Yeah, right. You cannot keep greenlighting these series that are going nowhere simply for the sake of making content. You just start making dedicated, good pieces of media. And that seems to be the plan. That's what Iger's indicated. That's why they've rolled back on Marvel releases this year. They're putting a lot of stake into Deadpool, Wolverine. And notably, like you've mentioned in the past, with their 20th Century Fox acquisition, another Iger approval, they've got the entire X-Men library they should probably start leveraging soon. They're doing something with Fantastic Four, right? They've at least finally got a cast announced. Something's got to come out of that. But most importantly, like, these films cannot simply be pretty to look at, flash in the pan, go and stuff popcorn in your face features. They need to be good movies. They need to be good movies that people leave and they tell their friends about. And they go to work and say, have you seen this new movie? It's great. You should go see it. Nobody's recommending these things anymore.
Yeah, for like 3-4 solid weeks, there was nothing but Dune memes all over Twitter. I mean, people couldn't stop talking about it. And that's what you want your movie to be like, where everyone's talking about it. Everyone's making jokes, making memes, having serious conversations, fun conversations, that kind of thing, where it's part of the cultural zeitgeist. And Disney is just not, everything they put out is just so forgettable lately.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think this has to start with like a quality script or like a great director or somebody with a brilliant idea, because it doesn't really have to. Like, I think you just have to be willing to let creative shine through in the face of potential failure. That's how you produce something exceptional, right? You make something that exceeds what people expect. The two performances I point to in this regard is Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, a film that then CEO Michael Eisner tried to shut down a number of times and reportedly hated watching dailies for, because he thought Johnny Depp was blowing the whole thing. Then it comes out, surprise, huge banger, launches a franchise, 5 films, right? Like, and then CEO Michael Eisner assumed it would not work and went with it anyway, and it totally worked. Had a lot of failures too along the way, right? They made Eddie Murphy's Haunted Mansion hot off the heels of their Pirates of the Caribbean ride film, and that didn't really work. But like, they were just willing to try. And then to follow that, Jon Favreau signs Robert Downey Jr. to be Tony Stark, and Iron Man launches a franchise. Like, a sarcastic performance with some genuine heart and personality can push people to be something that folks want to talk about, something that fans want to rally around. And lately, it just doesn't seem like Disney has a lot of that magic. I've heard Iger talking about whether or not the magic's still there, and it's like, well, you better find it, because you guys are having a board of directors vote tomorrow, and you better have some answers, man.
Yeah, you got to find some way to pivot, and it's weird that I mean, I think just because Iger, I almost said Eisner, Bob Iger has been there so long, I think he's probably going to hold the seat. But a lot of blame has been placed on Bob Chapek, which was the previous CEO, but who was only there for a couple of years, was anointed,
Dude.
tapped by Iger himself, and now the guy that you chose to replace you're trying to take the whole blame on. But again, it all really comes down to Disney Plus. It's really not sustainable. It really needs to be more like the Disney Channel, where all your kiddie stuff is on there, and like you need to be pushing theatrical releases majorly. That's where Marvel should been. They cannot put out a Star Wars to save their life. Like, again, they're sitting on massive properties, and that's what fueled the parks. That's what fueled the whole tales. That's what fuels the merchandise. If you don't come out with culturally important films that you can then sell all your other experiences through, it all comes tumbling down. Same thing with Marvel. I don't know why they've sitting on X-Men for 5 years since they've had the property. I don't know what they're doing. They've taken too long. The moment's passed. Like the superhero wave is kind of on the downside, and we might get a revival next year when all the DC starts, but Marvel's kind of behind the 8 ball now. So it's just like they gotta get good movies made. They gotta focus on the creative, like you said.
Yes, like you have to be making art that people want to be a part of, including, I mean, God, actors and actresses are talking about passing on Marvel projects now because they just feel like that's not that good. Finn Wolfhard said in a video with Variety that he didn't want to be in a Marvel movie anymore, even though he's worked with Paul Rudd on 2 films, those Ghostbusters movies. I'm sure they're buddy. He's like, nah, I don't need any help over at that studio, thanks. Kristen Stewart, hot off the heels of Love Lies Bleeding, said she would never be in a Marvel film unless like Greta Gerwig directs it. This is the same woman who said she would be in any film with any other actor or actress because she just feels like she can work alongside anybody. Won't even touch Marvel with a 10-foot pole. These are 2 small examples, but they're up and coming talent, and they got friends in the industry who are also talent. And it's like, you guys are, oh man, like just seems like a snowball of bad ideas, just snowballing into more bad ideas. So going into this director's thing, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm assuming the stock will take a tumble no matter how you spin it, right? Like there's not going to be a way, like, just, dude.
First off, never take financial advice from a podcast, but hope everyone's short in Disney.
Right. Yeah, this is simply for educational purposes only and is not official. Yeah, no, not at all.
Entertainment purposes only.
If you come to Off Script for your finance advice, you're my kind of listener. Thanks for being here. Like and subscribe. But anyway, We'll talk more about Disney in the future. Like, there's obviously going to be more developments in this. We'll likely report on whatever this board of directors vote is next week. So if you want to hear us talk about that, go ahead and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. While you're here, we'd appreciate it. And we'll talk more on it when we get back to it next week. Now, something I'm very excited to talk about. I'm so excited to talk about this movie, Andy. Oh man, and I mean that.
Me too.
I don't want anybody to think I'm being sarcastic. I don't want anybody to think I'm insincere. I didn't know a lot about this movie going in, and now we're here and we've seen it. I'm excited to talk about it. I'm going to be taking the summary on it, so please excuse my clumsy delivery. The movie is Late Night with the Devil. So Late Night with the Devil is set in 1977. The satanic panic, Andy, right? When we don't have the internet and everyone's afraid of Dungeons and Dragons. And right at the height of this, Jack Delroy, a Chicago radio station host, gets a job hosting a late night television show for UBC called Night Owls, right? He's going to compete with Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, variety show, doing sketches and bits and having guests on, just like any other late night show. You know him, you love him, with a goofy 70s set, of course. But when they can't quite get over the hump, and regarding some strange happenings in Jack Delroy's past, suddenly Night Owl's ratings are in free fall. And in an attempt to get things drummed up, to drum up some interest, they start introducing controversial bits and having weird guests join Jack on the show. None of it works until one night, Halloween 1977, when Jack Delroy lines up the perfect lineup of guests to have on his spooky Halloween show, including a conjurist who can produce telepathic messages from the dead out of their audience. Medium, that's the word I'm looking for. A skeptic, a man who used to be into magic but is no longer, and now denounces all of it and proves it wrong live on television. And of course, a young girl and her psychic, scientist, medium person, mentor, guardian.
Parapsychologist.
parapsychologist, thank you, Andy, who are going to come on the show and perform an exorcism or a conversation with her demon live on the air in Late Night with the Devil. This is a Shudder feature from a couple of young directors. Well, not that young directors. Cameron and Colin Cairnes. They are brothers. They are writing, directing duo. I've done only a couple small projects in the past. One of them also involving television called Scare Campaign in 2016. That was their last feature. Otherwise, here they are in 2023 with the Shudder feature, Late Night with the Devil. Andy, what'd you think?
You know, I'd heard a lot of good things. There was a whole lot of hype. And, you know, you never know whether or not to believe it. A lot of times people overhype things or hype things up that aren't that interesting. But man, did this movie grab me. From the beginning, we have a great setting, this 70s talk show era, struggling late night show. Beloved Jack Delroy coming fresh off the death of his poor wife, trying to save the show. A man who will kind of do anything to get ahead, to get ahead of that Johnny Carson spot, and who's kind of relegated to, for his show, getting more and more ridiculous, kind of bringing on circus acts, and it plays. It's like half play, half film, but it works so well. There's great kind of background characters. And it just gets more and more kind of disturbing. It sets things up, but kind of pulls the rug out from under you. There's a number of red herrings that really work. But I think what I enjoy the most is that, like most good movies, it has something to say. It's a commentary about our need for constant content and milking content out of anything, especially tragedy, the kind of need to succeed. And also kind of the difference between a man with and without convictions, because Jack Delroy is someone who will just say and believe whatever he needs to get ahead, where his guests are kind of falling on one side or the other of paranormal belief.
Late Night with the Devil is a film with layers, and I love the way that our characters are layered, every single one of them, much like our presentation, that I think is really fascinating. Obviously, when you see the trailer for Late Night for the Devil, you understand that what you're watching is a television program, but it's film, right? We're going to the movies. We are in the world of film. And Late Night with the Devil does a really, really clever job of walking this tightrope. It opens with a quick 5-minute sequence, very well put together, narrated by Michael Ironsides, explaining Jack Delroy and the show and where it's at. And then it's set up that we will be watching essentially the masters from the evening on 1977 when the program ran. That's it. And then it switches to 4x3 and boom, we're watching the show. This is exactly as it aired. That's the presentation. And you know, as well as I do, that we're not watching a TV show, we're watching a film, right? This is a fictional thing. And you know at the end, based on the title and what you've seen in the trailers, that things are not going to go well on this show. And this procedural performance that all of these people are performing in this show. Jack is reading his cue cards. He's got his guy Gus, who like is his showman in front of the band, who he like cuts to. He's got his crowd that he talks to. Like all of this is such a familiar, warm setting. Even the set, right? The 1970s studio set is all fantastic. But you know that this has to come unglued from what we're seeing, because we're not simply watching the masters of a show, we're watching a film. And that progression, like when the show cuts to commercial break and we move out of the world of our cameras that are on set and into backstage, and it's handheld, right? And we're using snap zooms and like crash pans in black and white to see Jack Delroy talking to his producer Leo about how things are going, and it's sweeps week. We got to beat Carson tonight. Like all of that is such great tangible setup for a world that feels so real, even though it is, of course, complete fabrication. And of course, it leads you to wonder, well, how are they going to get there at the end, right? Like how is this presentation going to wrap? It's unique and interesting, and it has you twirling your mustache like from the first 10 minutes. Like really fascinating setup and a great set throughout for an otherwise very small feature with a very small cast. There's only like 10 people in this movie.
Yeah, it works so well on so many levels. One of the recreation of the late night kind of show that they have a band, they got the band leader, they got the crowd, they got kind of these cheesy sets. I want to kind of talk through his guests as we meet them. The very first person who comes out is Christou, the medium, the psychic. And this movie is very intentional. It's very funny in moments, even though it's played very serious. But there's parts that are just pretty laugh out loud. Christou he's trying to read the crowd, and he's like, "Is there anyone with this name? This one, anyone?" And he bombs for like 5 minutes straight. Can't get a hook on anyone. Can't. It's so funny. He's just doing terribly. He eventually kind of hits it, and it gets better. And then the second guy, the guy who used to be a magician, is now a skeptic. President of the Skeptics Club. He talks about all the ways that this is fake. He didn't really change didn't really talk to the. And so we get a really good setting, and we have our believers and non-believers basically. And that's kind of the two stakes that we're on. And again, Jack Delroy in the middle, but it's a great setup for then our next couple of guests who's after, I forget who's after the medium, but we have the girl who's been allegedly possessed and can talk with the devil, which is kind of the big sell of the film. But there's so much more going on.
Yeah, I was going to tell you IMDb is literally down, so if I couldn't tell you who's in it exactly, but I'll talk through our other guests, of course. Yes, our psychic medium and her young subject are fascinating and interesting, and play into this exorcist type gag, right? Young girl who's been possessed, like the idea that she'll become devil and like her eye, throw some contacts in her eyes and maybe throw some makeup on her face. Like that's all well and good, but I think all of that is overshadowed by the performance from David Dastmalchian as Jack Delroy. Jack Delroy I think it might be one of Dastmalchian's best performances ever. He's so great. He's so great as Jack Delroy. Because Dastmalchian is not a big outgoing actor, right? Like that's not what he does. Yeah. Yes, like he does not do these big leading man performances. So Jack like him managing to nail like this tone as a talk show host who's struggling, but obviously keeping it up on the air, like is all well and good. But like just from the open, just the way he comes out on stage, talks to the audience, does the opening monologue, laughs at some of the cue cards that his cue card guy is holding, talks to Gus and the band. Like he's so great. He nails it so good. I don't know how much tape he must have watched to get this. I don't know if he's a huge late night fan. He's fantastic. And that's all a great setup for when things start to go wrong, because Jack Delroy is a showman. He is playing it up, of course, for the audience, but also people love him because he feels genuine. He does exhibit some genuine emotion, just like any late night host. And he manages to walk this line between, okay, we're presenting something to the audience versus I am feeling something genuinely that rattles me to my core, that is like so unique throughout the whole feature. When he's just about to cue up something big for the audience, we're going to talk to them. We're going to talk to the devil right after these messages, right? Cut to commercial. Like it's so charming and perfect, and manages to have this good back and forth that creates great pacing throughout the feature. I kept thinking as we were watching, how is this going to be stretched to a 90-minute movie, right? We're supposed to be watching a half-hour program. Totally works, and manages to get way over the hump right when you know things are going to get big. It goes exactly as big as it needs to be. Like, oh man, just a ton of fun.
Another nice addition is that there are breaks between the show where they cut to commercial and everyone, they reset the set and people run backstage, grab coffee, smoke cigarettes because it's the 70s. And those scenes are in black and white, and you see Jack Delroy kind of turn it off. He turns off the persona, and it just shows how performative the whole thing is. And even though this is, taking place in the 70s and a talk show, I think it's very relevant to like this need to portray certain things like via social media and the way content, everything is content. And one of the things at the beginning is his Jack Delroy's wife has died of cancer, and they brought her on the show, and they say, even that show, it was this highest rated show, but still not better than Carson's. Like that, it's like, man, you're using your dying wife for content on your late night show. It's really kind of gross feeling, but it's a reminder how like that's happens so much in modern social media. People post about tragedies or look at this car wreck, things like that. So it's really kind of an indictment of modern kind of performative things that we do.
It's funny you say that. Like much like I think New York is like a character in a New York movie. Like our audience is a big character in Late Night with the Devil. And on its face, especially in the open, it feels a lot like Nope, right? If you like Nope, you're gonna like Late Night with the Devil, I think, especially because of our studio audience scenes.
Gordy's home.
Yeah, our audience is right. Our audience is always watching, right? Like even when the cameras are off, the audience is out there, and production assistants have to entertain them and turn on the applause sign, right? And like, I love the feeling that everything has to be presented. So what you are seeing as presented to you, how Jack will frame something or say something or maybe ask Lily a question, like you can never really tell if he means it or if he's just doing it for the bit. And the double speak in that is fascinating. Every character's got it, right? Every character has how they're presenting on stage versus how they really feel. Feels a lot like a stage play in that way. I thought it felt like 12 Angry Men, right? Jack Delroy, like he's obviously putting on a show for his audience, and he says, this is about you. We're here for you. But no, he's not. He's there for Sweeps Week. He's got to get ratings, right? Like he did the last year of his contract. Laura Gordon playing June Ross Mitchell, the psychic
parapsychologist.
Dude, I cannot keep parapsychologist locked down. That word is way too large for me. She obviously wants to make sure Lily is okay and she's there for her, but she's also going on TV. She wants to play up a bit of a show. Reese Autry as Gus, the band leader, right? The sidekick. He is just trying to keep the show going, but also is a little concerned all this Satan stuff is getting a little out of control. Like, I love the way everybody in here has how they're showing versus how they feel. Every single person, even the side characters. Like, it creates layers of intention that give you something to chew on when you're watching the feature. Like Andy said, like this opening scene when Jack Delroy has his dying wife on. And I think on its face, everybody in the audience, in the show, in the film, The Late Night with the Devil, is going, oh, you know, right? Our slack-jawed American audience, oh, they feel, it's so sweet that he had her on. And Andy and I are sitting here in 2024 watching this in the theater going, this is a bit. He's doing it. He's milking it for content. You know, like we see the cynicism of it. And you get to explore the whole film through that. I think it'll make for a really rich rewatch, if anything, like which I'm excited to get back to sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I definitely would like to check this out. Again, I think one of the interesting things is, so we have the medium, we have the parapsychologist, and we have Ian Bliss's character, who is the former magician, now president of the Skeptics Association, whatever. And the second act is a lot of kind of debating between him and the medium and the parapsychologist, and they're on very opposite sides of the belief spectrum. One side is, you know, they believe firmly in these paranormal things or the psychic readings. And at first with Christou, we know he's kind of doing the psychic thing where he's reading the room and doing a lot of like techniques for that. But then there's also part of it that's like, well, maybe he's actually maybe conjuring something more. Same things with the parapsychologist. And then we have Ian Bliss who's like, all this can be explained, everyone's a liar, like I will give you $100,000 if you can prove the existence of the paranormal. So it's just interesting that we have two sides of a spectrum, and you could kind of apply this to lots of to religion, to faith, to politics, because then you have Jack Delroy right there in the middle, not who refuses to commit to either side.
Yes. But notably has a shady past, as his intro in the show. So you're already looking at him weird. Ian Bliss is great in this movie. Like, the skeptic character is so essential to what's happening here, because you sitting in the theater watching Late Night with the Devil understand that a lot of this could be show, right? You're watching a show. You're watching a presentation of events. Having a character on stage go, that's fake. I don't believe this. This is junk. And maybe even put up a $500,000 bond for it in case somebody can prove it's real. Fascinating. And notably, because neither of us could identify in the theater, Andy figured this out later, Ian Bliss is from those Matrix movies, right? That's right. Where he was the guy that Smith overtakes. The human Smith walking around Zion, right? That's him?
Yeah, exactly.
Good menace.
Is that guy's name, yeah.
Also worth mentioning, you see a little bit of it on the trailer. I wouldn't encourage you to look too close. It's a lot more fun to see in the film, but some good practical effects, right? It's a low budget. It's a Shudder horror feature, so not a lot of budget here, and they press on practical effects when they need to, and it ends up feeling nostalgic, right? Because it's a feature set in the 70s. It doesn't feel out of place to see an outdated visual effect. It almost feels appropriate because what you're watching is reportedly outdated footage. Like, it ends up being this really, really fantastic presentation from a couple of directors who I haven't seen anything from in the past, who are making something that feels really, really unique. I don't know what they follow this up with, honestly. Like I said, their last feature is also television oriented. I think it's something to do with like some kind of game show or live show. I don't know if they just keep going in this space.
Bigger, more money.
Dude, it's really tremendous. Any other thoughts for recommendations, Andy?
So there's a lot of homages to other horror properties. Diane and Elaine Warren, who are the real life characters that are based, the Conjuring films are based on. The girl Lily that gets possessed, very much reminiscent of The Exorcist. You know, some of the very like the skin tears, the eyes, that sort of thing. So it knows where it's at in the horror universe, and it's great that it kind of did its own thing while still being inspired by all this great horror to have come before it.
Yeah. I'm really pleased with Devil. Also, keep an eye out for some really fantastic, well put together sequences within the larger movie. There's that 5-minute like opening narration from Ironsides, which is just pitch perfect. There's a really great hypnotism scene, like the variety show nature of late night, like really does give opportunities for laughs, opportunities for tension. You get a really fantastic blend of experience. It ends up being a wildly fun ride all the way throughout. Any other thoughts, Andy, for recommendations?
I think I'm ready.
Andy, would you recommend Late Night with the Devil?
Absolutely. Big hit for the horror fans out there. David Dalmatian is great as the enigmatic Jack Delroy, who'll kind of do anything to get ahead. It's a quick 90 minutes. The style of the setting of the 70s talk show works really well. It's been recreated with painstaking accuracy. We get fun characters. We get a lot of dialogue. There's a lot of arguing and debating back and forth. A lot of fun effects, and man, it goes. It's like at a 9 the whole time, and then it just kind of goes up to 11 by the end.
Dude, I cannot recommend Late Night with the Devil enough. Tons of fun. I go see it in a theater as soon as you can. Bring your friends. Horror heads are going to love it. Jordan Peele fans are going to love it. I would wager this may be top 10 material. Certainly honorable mention material. If this doesn't make a top 10 list, like, my God, it is worth mentioning. This is like, I want the Blu-ray kind of stuff. I can't wait to watch it again. Late Night with the Devil is rad. I do want to have one more quick conversation about this before I move on. I feel it's obligatory. Regarding the use of AI in the film, Andy, we saw a lot of this on Twitter. In case you don't know, I did want to just quickly mention before we move on to wrap the episode, there are 3 images in the film that were AI generated fully. The directors admitted to this. They just didn't want to make additional art assets for it. It's a couple of quick slates in the movie. Jury's still out on whether or not it'll get pulled before home release, but it is in the theatrical we saw. Andy, how do we feel about low-budget features leveraging AI for content instead of paying creators?
This may not be a popular opinion, but if there's anyone that should kind of be using AI, and it's cheap productions, it's people on a shoestring budget trying to make it happen. Again, it's 3 slides. It's not a lot. They probably could have paid someone. That's maybe a few $100s worth of someone's time. Again, it's just three slides that you just plug in, but. Maybe it was just easier, or maybe whoever they contracted out decided to use AI because it was just faster and cheaper. I don't hate it for a cheap production.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. Listen, I don't think we should be using AI in features. I totally agree that they should have just cooked something up. I think they should pull it before the film goes to home release. I would rather it not be in there, especially because it's used so sparingly. But that being said, I kind of agree with where Andy's coming from. Like, considering the availability of resources on these features, the people who are going to cut corners are the ones who can't afford the corners in the first place. Disney shouldn't be doing this. These guys, it's hard for me to disagree with it. Like, I get it. If I was a young up-and-comer and needed some assets for my movie, like, yeah, I might be inclined to push that way. If anything, like I was telling Andy after the movie, we also watched Godzilla x Kong this week. You're telling me every rock and tree and every CGI landscape shot in that movie was made by people? None of that was procedurally generated? None of that was cooked up from a marketplace? Unreal Engine didn't just have those things lying around? Like, I don't know, dude. Like, I do think it's bad. I do think it shouldn't be in there. That being said, I hope they remove it. And I can't say I let that tarnish my experience watching the film, because I know I've seen people say, oh, they got AI in there, immediate boycott. I'm not going to see Late Night with the Devil. And I would tell you, after having seen it, I cannot disagree more. This movie genuinely is doing something special. These directors are moving on to bigger projects. This is rad. Go see Late Night. Just, tell people you didn't like the AI in it, because you don't. I don't either. But that's it. That's Late Night with the Devil. That's Godzilla Kong. That's Disney. That's news. That's what we watched this week. That's the show. Andy, episode 248, well and good behind us. What are we watching next week?
And 250 is just around the corner.
Just around the corner.
Big release this week is Dev Patel's Monkey Man, which is the big action film, his directorial debut and kind of action debut. Looks like a lot of fun. Then we got to kind of take a look at, see what else. We're going to find something on streaming that is going to be announced. Other big opening this week is The First Omen, which is a horror film. That looks interesting, but we're probably not going to do it for the show. And then in the coming weeks, or actually also on streaming this week, will be The Zone of Interest on Max, April 5th. I highly encourage you to see that if you haven't already. And then the following couple of weeks, Civil War, Alex Garland's political action, who knows, comes out at April 12th. So a lot in the bag, but Monkey Man for next week.
All right. Well, I'm stoked about Monkey Man. We'll find something else to watch. And I'm going to have to go back and revisit Zone. If you didn't watch it, we covered it on the show. Absolutely worth checking out. Should totally check out Zone of Interest. It is hardcore. It's rad, dude. It's art for art's sake. Zone of Interest is cool. And that's episode 248. Good Lord, we're ready to move past it. Andy's right. Episode 250 is coming sooner rather than later. Big plans for 250. Can't wait to figure them out. And if you enjoyed what we're doing here, if you liked episode 248 or 247 or any of the previous content we've done, if you found us on YouTube with one of our individual reviews, or Facebook or Twitter, or one of the shorts Andy posted, best thing you can do to keep up with us, give us a follow. Right there, whatever platform you're on. Like I said, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the usual social media places. You can find our audio podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, iHeartMedia. You might have even found that here. You might be listening to us there right now. We're on YouTube. Big things happening on YouTube. In all of those places, you can rate, you can review, you can like, comment, subscribe. The biggest thing to help all of us, probably just subscribe. Honestly, you have no idea how much it helps. If you have the means, hit that subscribe button. It would be a big help for us here on the podcast. Keep these things coming at you. And if you want to check out other things we're doing, interviews, additional content, you can check out our website, offscriptfilmreview.com, and you can write into the show. Correspondence available at mail@offscriptfilmreview.com. Jot us up an email. Tell us what you thought of Late Night with the Devil, huh? Tell us what you thought of Godzilla Kong. This whole Disney thing, if you got some inside scoop, let us know. I'd appreciate it. I'd love to know what's going on. I'll be keeping an eye on the news. We'll be talking about it next week on episode 249. From all of us at Offscript, the home of Bold Cinema, I'm Zach Lewis.
And I'm Dr. Draper.
Thanks for watching.